Any of the kids that want to go down with Miss Kelsey and Miss Elizabeth to Children's Church, you guys are more than welcome to go down there. They are going to practice those Christmas songs and do a short little devotional down there, so you guys are more than welcome to go. Not pushing you out, just saying there's an opportunity for you. We are in week 3, but it's our second I am statement. Our Christmas series is to go through who Jesus claimed to be, because what my hope is that we don't just leave Jesus in the little manger and just go, we're celebrating a little baby Jesus, but we think about all that manger ended up meaning. That Jesus did grow up to be a man. And there are these 7 divine qualities that he claims himself to be. And so today we're going to look at the second one of these, the light of the world. And I just couldn't help but think today as we dive into Scripture and we see the beautiful snow outside. It always makes me think of that hymn that sin had left its crimson stain, but you washed me white as snow. It's such a beautiful hymn. It's such a beautiful message, because as I was just talking to somebody in the church this morning, we all have a testimony. We all have stuff that we've done that has drifted us away from God. We have all covered our garments with the crimson stain of sin. We've all done it. That's part of becoming a Christian, is you have to admit you need something to cleanse you. And like a beautiful set of snow out here that's perfectly white, or the work that a magic eraser can do to remove crayon from a wall. That was Kelsey and I's Friday. But it just leaves it as if it was never even there. Not that God does just a good enough job to get us into heaven, but that he cleanses us of every piece of our sin, as though we were white as snow, as though we had never even sinned at all. Those are the clothes we get to put on. That is a beautiful message. And so Jesus is the light of the world. Last week he was the bread of life, that no one who gets to heaven will eat of anything other than him. And today we get to see that he's the light of the world. And as I was sitting making this PowerPoint, I thought, man, I did not mean to create this to overlap with Advent at all. Advent was going to stand on its own, and then God last night, as I was putting the finishing touches on this, because if I'm being honest, I really thought we were getting 14 inches of snow and that we were going to be snowed in and canceled. So I did not make this until last night. You hired a man who's not all-knowing and procrastinates just a little bit. Okay, so I made this last night, and it's so perfectly going to align with Advent, to where I'll light the first couple candles, and then I know we've had some volunteers to do weeks after that, so it's all going to tie together. And so let's look at this morning. John chapter 8, verses 12 through 20. It says, Jesus spoke to them again, I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So the Pharisees said to him, you are testifying about yourself. Your testimony is not valid. Even if I testify about myself, Jesus replied, my testimony is true, because I know where I came from and where I am going. But you do not know where I come from or where I'm going. You judge by human standards. I judge no one. And if I do judge, my judgment is true, because it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. Even in your law it is written that the testimony of 2 witnesses is true. I am the one who testifies about myself, and the Father who sent me testifies about me. Then they asked him, where is your Father? You know neither me nor my Father, Jesus answered. If you knew me, you would also know my Father. He spoke these words by the treasury while teaching in the temple, but no one seized him, because his hour had not yet come. So just another beautiful little passage of Scripture, so much shorter than last week's, amen. But Jesus, this time, he's not at the feeding of the 5,000, but this time he just got done saving the adulterous woman. So this is right after the Pharisees set up this elaborate trap to catch Jesus. Now, the wild part about this is, if you really study this, you start to question how they knew this woman was committing adultery, who she was committing adultery with, and what the whole purpose of any of it was. Because most scholars believe that it wasn't that the Pharisees had not only caught the woman in adultery, but they had set the trap. That they had set this woman up to sin so that they could throw her at the feet of Jesus and say, look, I got you. You can't love the woman who just came out of adultery because the law says stone her, and you can't forgive her and yet be who you claim to be as well. We got you this time. The ultimate gotcha moment. And so Jesus, he says to them, he says, I am the light of the world. I am the true light. Like, I am the one who's truly trying to reveal darkness. Whereas darkness to the world is just political. It is just, I gotcha, this is how I get authority, this is how I got clout. Jesus says, no, I am the true source of light. And that leads us to this first point, that Jesus teaches that he is the light that guides us through our lives. That in the midst of everything going on, I used to be a guy who flipped on the news like every morning. Fox and Friends, go-to. It was funny. You know, they cracked some jokes on there. It was real lighthearted. I would try to watch the news. I'd try to keep up with everything. And then something inside me just felt like, man, I'm just being pulled. This is just politicized. This to me is just garbage. Now, if you disagree with me on that point, I'm sorry, but that's just the way I feel. Because what I know is Fox News is not the light of the world. And neither is CNN or MSNBC or any other news place. The light of the world is Jesus Christ. And if we want to know how to live our lives, and we want to know what's supposed to guide our lives, it's Jesus Christ and Christ alone. It is knowing who he was, what he came to do, and the only way to know that is through this. This is our ultimate news station. Because everything going on in the world, they're asking you to make decisions and pick sides, and there is only ever one side. We may have multiple people to elect during a time of political campaign, during an election cycle. We may have two choices, but there is only ever one king. All right? And as much as anyone who's ever been elected thinks that they have authority, Jesus tells Pilate right when he's on trial, you would have no authority if it wasn't given to you by my Father. There is no authority in this world that God has not ordained. And that's a tough pill to swallow, church, because that means in some way, the leader of China, Russia, all these evil nations, in some way God has ordained that they serve there for a purpose. We think about our brothers, hopefully in Christ one day, the Jews. Why do they continuously get attacked? Because they were continuously attacked in this book. That this is a continuing story. And so in the same way where the Philistines and everybody else would attack them, so would the Germans and everybody else. Now, so would Hamas today. Because it is through their attack that God's constantly waking them up. And so the hard part of this is to understand that God ordains all things. Even the evil, he has his hand on, because it's through the evil, through the suffering, through all that stuff, that he can shine light and truly either refine us or point us to the need for something greater. And so we see that Jesus teaches that he is the light that guides us through our lives. And that if we trust anything other than Christ, we're going to miss the mark. We're going to be led astray. And it's hard because when we talk about things like, you know, what am I supposed to do? Follow Jesus. Does it really matter, or is there something more? It's church. No, it is following and trusting Jesus. I trust that most people in this world understand that this world is divinely created. Most people will not surrender to Jesus Christ because they don't want a Lord. When we talk about things like abortion or anything having to do with really radical left-wing policy, the problem is always my choice. They are always fighting for the right to have their own choice. But at the forefront of Christianity is understanding I'm my own enemy, and I need God's choice, not my choice. That my life's only going to get better when I remove myself from the equation. So when we talk about abortion and somebody says, it's my body, it's my choice, right there you declare who your Lord is. Who's the Lord of my body? I am. So I get to make a choice over it. Whereas, church, this isn't my body. This is God's body. This is God's temple that He is trying to use for His glory and His creation. Church, even though my family has moved into that house, that's not the church's house or my house. That's God's house. Those two vans that are sitting out there, those aren't my vans. My name may be on the title. Those are God's vans. Right? Everything in this world is God's. And if we use it like it's God's, then we don't abuse it and we use it for glory. We take better care of it because it is something that has been gifted to us. And so we look at Jesus needing to be the light of the world. And it's for this real big reason that Jesus' life reestablishes an objective standard that people have been created to live. We see here in this passage that Jesus says, you judge by human standards. I judge no one. And if I do judge, my judgment is true, because it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. We need an objective standard in this world. We need a truth that does not change. It does not waver. Right? We don't need to be like, oh, this was how we lived in the 60s. This is how we lived in the 70s. This is how we lived. We don't need it to change decade to decade. We need one standard that is never changing. In church, that's this. This is a always true, never changing book. The objective standard has never changed. Jesus came back to reestablish that standard. From the time when Adam sinned and they were kicked out of the garden until Jesus returned, God was just speaking truth. He was just giving laws to people and asking them to live up to them. And they couldn't. Because church, how many of us in our lives can live up to the standards? How many of us can remember to get the brownies out of the oven before they start to burn? Right? Like, we don't do a good job. We don't do a good job setting a plan and keeping it. We don't do a good job being able to achieve all that we want to achieve. I don't do a good job objectively parenting my kids. Because some days when I feel really good, I'm super patient. I do a great job. And then days like yesterday come, where my back's sore from moving and I'm tired and I just want to take a nap, and I feel myself growling at him more than I need to growl at him. We need an objective standard. We need a Lord in our life who doesn't waver. Who, no matter what he's feeling, he never changes. And that's Jesus Christ, the true light of the world. The light that shines in dark places and exposes it. You know, a lot of times when I think about this passage, I think about if you've ever walked into a room and you've turned on the lights and like all the mice, bugs, everything just scattered. If you've ever seen that, where you walk in and guys, when we are first exposed to light, that's what happens to us. It's almost blinding, right? If you're fast asleep, your room's pitch black and your wife comes in and opens up the curtains, it's like, whoa, where'd all this light come from? Light exposes things, church. Light shows us what is wrong. And honestly, it's light that divides us. It's Jesus' light that divides us. It's people not wanting to have a Lord, like I had already said. That's the number one problem we have in churches. I just watched a documentary this week, church, over a guy who I actually really looked up to. I really looked up to this pastor. He pastors a mega church. I've read his books. I've done it all. I thought he was doing everything the right way. And I watched this documentary on how he truly led a church. You know what his biggest problem was? It was his church. It had to run the way he wanted it to. The changes had to be his way. He all of a sudden thought his pastor all of a sudden gave him a whole bunch of authority. And it honestly humbled me, because I think he just started out too young. Youngest mega church pastor in the United States history. And next thing you know, there's all this light that's exposing all these dark things that were going on. It was exposing all this corruption, all this places where they kind of backdoored one pastor out to get him in, because they wanted him in there as the celebrity pastor of the church. And then in the same way, they kind of slided the guy out the wrong way. He started just changing all the stuff from top to bottom the wrong way, not listening to people. And it's always authority, church. It's always who's the light in the church. It's always a fight for authority. Always. What are these Pharisees fighting for? Why are they trying to catch Jesus? Jesus is stepping on their toes. Jesus is undermining their authority, saying that you just judge by human standards. Church, can I tell you that the biggest problem any church will ever have is who's in authority? The biggest problem we'll have in our own lives is who's in authority. You know, I tell Kelsey all the time that the biggest fight in my life is trying to figure out, as a pastor, how much am I supposed to do? How much am I supposed to encourage others to do? Authority. Whose light is it? Whose purpose are we called to live for? You know, and I look at this place and I tell everybody, I said, I'm spoiled rotten here. I will never forget the last church I pastored. We had a guy who came and did snow removal until I moved into the parsonage. And then once I moved into the parsonage, he must have thought as other duties as assigned meant that I was all of a sudden a snowplow guy. I owned 3/4 of a shovel. I didn't even have the full end of one of the sides of the shovel. I had no way to move snow. And then here we have people who just rally and get up early in the morning, which is probably not early to them, but to me it's kind of early. They get up and they're out here working. We got people in the church who are raking up leaves the day before it snows, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. Like, it's going to snow on them. Like, they're going to be okay. But we're spoiled here because we have so many people with servant hearts. But church, we have to understand that's not how it is everywhere. And we have to understand that that's not how it's always going to be here. I guarantee you in this church before, there's been bickerments over which path to go, which direction to go. Lord, church, I am here to tell you that as long as Jesus is Lord, He is the one who's always going to direct our path. He's always going to be the one. He's always going to be the one that we let make every decision here. Because we don't want our way. You don't want this to be any of our churches. You want this to be Jesus' church. And I'm going to end with this last little bit that Jesus says, because it really stood with me about Advent. He said he spoke these words by the treasury while he was teaching in the temple, but no one seized him because his hour had not yet come. So Jesus does what Jesus does really well. People set traps to try to say, oh, you're not very loving, are you? They set traps, and then Jesus always flips it back on them in the most loving way possible and says, you need to get out of your own way. You're not fighting against me, you're fighting against the Father. You're fighting against the God you claim to serve. But it says, no one seized him because his time had not yet come. There is so much hope in this statement. There is so much hope in this statement because it points to the fact that there is a prophecy, there is a plan that has to work out the way God ordains it to work out. Do you guys know what the first candle of Advent is? It's the hope candle, also called the prophecy candle. And hidden right here, yet again, I say this almost every week because God keeps blowing my mind every week. There's a line right here that points to hope. See, these people couldn't even seize Jesus because God said they couldn't seize him. Church, did you guys know that whatever's going to happen in our lives is going to happen in our lives? And no matter who wants to attack us, no matter who wants to try to take it away, no matter how much we want to try to fight to change it, did you guys know that what needs to happen in our life is going to happen in our lives so that God can fulfill the purposes he has for each and every one of us? I cried like a baby on Friday. I thought I was going to be doing my first cartwheel of my life on Friday. We got the rental house that we were living in completely cleaned out. We got it completely cleaned out. We shampooed the carpets. Give me a pat on the back, tell me I'm a great guy. We got this place cleaned out, spick and span. It looks like you could move a new family in it Monday. That's just who Kelsey and I want to be for the rest of our lives. Is that if we move out of somewhere, we want the person to know how grateful we were that they would choose us to live there and that they made the right choice because we are truly grateful for it. But man, I thought I was going to do a cartwheel out of this place, and I know it's hard to believe, but like I'm not Chris Farley, and I can't do a cartwheel. Okay, I ended up crying like a baby leaving this rental because as I look at it, all I could see was that's where I held Samson for the first time. As the snow was coming in, all I could think about was digging that driveway out so I could get Samson over to the hospital because his bilirubin numbers were just a little bit high, so they had to check him to make sure he wasn't going to be a little jaundiced baby. They needed to put him under the lights, right? And all of a sudden I could just remember a million things from that house. And it just flooded me because I thought I was going to be so ready to move out. And I am. Trust me, church. Like, Kelsey and I sleep like a baby here. We do. But like I told Kelsey, I said, this is the last home we'll ever bring a kid home to. Like as crazy as that sounds, that's what I think about these days. But I also cried and told her this. I said, God has finally seen it fit to take me out of the desert. See, that house for 2 years was my spiritual desert. That house for 2 years, I didn't know if my ministry would ever have a parsonage again. I didn't know if my family would ever own a house. I didn't know if we'd ever have a home or if we'd have to rent from people. Like for 2 years, I spent it in that desert. For 2 years, I was hard. I never felt at home. I never felt like this was where my family was supposed to be. 2 years I spent in that desert. And then God reminded me of this. When we got that house, we had to sell a car just to have the deposit to make it into it. We had to sell as much as we could just to pay bills to be able to live. And as we were moving out, I got to looking around. I'm like, there's a dumpster here. There's Christmas gifts in the back of the van. And I'm like, man, the desert wasn't too bad after all. Like all that God had taught me in 2 years of living in that place, church. And you know how much your life can change in 2 years? But see, no one could seize him because his hour had not yet come. Did you guys know that Friday when we got the news that we could move up here was the exact day that God said you get to leave the desert? It couldn't be a day earlier or a day later. And the reason I tell you this and I tell you my story is because each of you have stuff that you're going through. And there's going to be people who watch this online someday that are going through stuff. And they're thinking, man, if only I could catch a break. If only I could catch a break. If only I could catch a break. But let me tell you, as long as Jesus is the light of the world, as long as God is sovereign, your life has to go through what it has to go through to create you to be who you're meant to be. I just told Mr. Stan this morning, I said, thank goodness those first 3 years of my 20s, I was as much of a hooligan as I was. Because that makes me really, really humble when I stand in this pulpit. Right? Those reminders of all those dumb things that I did, all those dumb and crazy nights that I don't know how I survived. They make sure to remind me that I can never get too big because I don't deserve to be here. That it is by God's grace that I'm here. But I also know that God in some way made sure that each one of those moments happened because he had a bigger plan for me. I am not saying if you're living in sin or you're doing something that God's ordaining the sin in your life. But I am saying that God will let you sin so that he can use it for his glory. So that he can humble you. So that he can open your eyes. Because church, Jesus just really made these Pharisees mad. He just really stepped on their toes. He undermined their authority. He actually took it from them and said, you're just earthly. I'm heavenly. Church, we all have a purpose. We all have a plan, and God is sovereign. So whatever you're going through today, you can trust that great is thy faithfulness. For 3 days since Friday, I have just sang out that hymn, great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. And it's not because I had blessing. It's because I had desert. I had dry season to wake me up to how good God is. How much he sustained me. And church, he's doing the same for you guys. So as I wrap this all up, I want to wrap it up by asking ourselves, what is our greatest source of hope? What is the greatest source of hope in our lives? Because right at the middle is the light of the world. See, I love only using this candle to light the middle candle. And you know what I like to do? That middle candle is the Christ candle. Some people save that for Christmas Eve. I like to light it first. Because then what I realize is when I take this candle of hope, this prophecy candle, I know that if they couldn't seize Jesus on that day because his time had not come, that whatever I'm going through today, I'm meant to go through today. Because if I was meant to be through it, I'd be through it. And if I was meant to have something I don't have today, I'd have it. But I can trust Jesus to be the hope for everything in my life. Because the Christ candle lights every bit of hope in my life. I hope I don't light this whole thing on fire, because that'd be a total rotten move. Alright. Slight burns, but we're going to get there. But the hope we have in our lives is because of Jesus Christ. It's as Paul said, he who began a good work in us will carry it out until the day of completion. That's it, church. This snow is a reminder of how Jesus washes us. And I'll tell you what, that's a wild thing, because I did a lot of things to make my garment as crimson as possible. I grew up a Panther. And that's real maroon. Alright? I did everything I could to stain that thing maroon and gold. Alright? Everything I could. And you know what? Just like that, Jesus said, you're washed, white as snow. You're a brand new creation. 2 years ago, I fell into the trap, messed up at a church, gave them what they needed to excommunicate me, ended up in a rental with nothing. 3 days ago, I watched the faithfulness of prayers from you guys and everybody else who's been praying for my family. None of which I deserve. But it happened because I had hope in Jesus. I trusted that God is big enough to do everything. And so I'm going to ask you this morning, what is our greatest hope in our lives? Is there anything in your life that you put more hope in than Jesus Christ? Or is there anything going on in your life today that's too big that God can't handle it? I'm going to close this in prayer. And then we're going to